Hello everyone. Before we get into today's story, I'm curious, where are you listening from, and at what time are you watching this video? Also, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy our stories. Now, let's jump into the video. The first indication that the God Emperor's light, that unwavering beacon against the galaxy's myriad terrors, had faltered in the forsaken Orpheus Reach was not a scream, not the sudden, percussive roar of Xeno's weaponry tearing through sanctified adamantium, but a silence. A profound, unnatural, and utterly chilling silence that crept into the hallowed, vaulted halls of the battle-barge Blade of Vigilance like an invisible, suffocating shroud, a tangible entity that smothered sound and stole the breath. I felt its insidious touch first in the chapel of Saint Celestine, a vast, echoing space where the very air usually thrummed with the ethereal, multi-layered chorus of the servitor choir. Their voices, painstakingly augmented and perfectly harmonized by ancient, revered tech sorcery, to resonate with the very structure of the ship, to vibrate in the bones of the faithful, guttered and died mid-verse, during the uplifting canticle of imperial truth. One moment their song soared, a testament to the Emperor's enduring glory. The next, there was only an echoing, stunned void, a vacuum more terrifying than any battle cry, a silence that pressed down with the weight of a dead star. The lumen globes, great orbs of crystal and brass that usually blazed with the fierce, unwavering light of a miniature sun, a comforting symbol of imperial enlightenment, flickered erratically, dimmed as if starved of power, and then cast only a pale, corpse-like spectral luminescence upon the towering marble statues of the imperial saints. Their carved faces, usually serene and inspiring, now seemed gaunt, hollow-eyed, and accusing in the sudden unwelcome gloom, their silent judgment fixed upon me. My name is Canoness Isolde Valerius, and for 73 hard-fought Terran years, I have served as a blade in the Emperor's hand, a warrior of the Adepta Sororitas, Order of the Ebon Chalice, an order known for its grim determination and unyielding faith in the face of the darkest heresies. The Blade of Vigilance, an ancient Retribution-class battle-barge, its adamantium hull scarred with the honorific pockmarks of 100 crusades, each scar a story of sacrifice and victory, was my command, my convent, and my unbreachable fortress as we patrolled the treacherous, often warp-storm-racked borders of the Segmentum Tempestus. We were 3 arduous weeks into our punitive sweep of the Orpheus Reach, a sparsely populated, ill-omened cluster of desolate mining worlds and forgotten frontier outposts that had recently, and with a chilling abruptness, fallen ominously silent. Astropathic communication, the lifeblood of interstellar imperial governance, had ceased without warning, the psychic screams of its astropaths abruptly cut off. Vital supply tithes, the due rendered unto the distant glory of Terra, had gone unpaid, a transgression that could not be ignored. And the few brave patrol vessels, swift frigates of the Imperial Navy, sent to investigate this disturbing anomaly, had simply vanished, their last, desperate Vox transmissions dissolving into a burst of meaningless, shrieking static, a fate all too common in the benighted corners of the galaxy. It was a familiar, sickening pattern, one that usually heralded incipient heresy, the insidious bloom of a Xeno's incursion, or perhaps something far older and more terrible awakening from its aeons-long slumber. Our mission, sanctioned by the High Lords of Terra themselves through the sacred auspices of the Ministorum, was clear: to restore the Emperor's dominion, to root out the darkness with flame and bolter, and to ensure the Orpheus Reach once again sang his praises, willingly or otherwise. 12,000 souls were aboard the Blade of Vigilance, from the veteran, battle-hardened sisters of my own command retinue, women whose faith was a weapon more potent than any power sword, to the teeming, anonymous thousands of naval armsmen, ship crew, and lobotomized, vat-grown indentured servitors who kept this behemoth of war functioning, their lives a constant, thankless sacrifice to the machine spirits of the vessel, each one in their own way a testament to the Imperium's unyielding, often brutal will. The silence in the chapel was not merely an absence of sound, it was a palpable presence, an entity in itself. It pressed against my eardrums with a physical force, a heavy, cloying, suffocating weight that seemed to absorb all other sensations, deadening the familiar thrum of the ship's engines, the distant clang of machinery, the very beat of my own heart. The scent of sacred incense, usually thick and cloying, a comforting aroma that spoke of prayer and devotion, thinned to a barely perceptible ghostly whisper, replaced by a faint, unsettlingly sterile, metallic tang like cold, freshly scrubbed iron, or the faint, coppery scent of old blood spilled on a forgotten, desecrated altar. I stood before the great, towering icon of the Emperor, his golden, impassive visage, usually a source of unwavering strength, divine solace, and righteous fury. Now, in the failing spectral light, his noble features seemed shadowed, distant, almost indifferent, as if he had turned his gaze away from this small, insignificant corner of his vast, embattled realm. A shiver, cold and unwelcome, an echo of a fear I thought I had long since purged, traced its icy way down my spine, a sensation I had not felt since my earliest terrifying days as a novice, facing the raw, unfiltered horrors of the warp for the first time, a child thrust into a war against gods and nightmares. Sister Superior Evangeline, I subvocalized into my personal vox link, my voice, usually a clear, commanding alto that could rally disheartened troops or cow a defiant heretic, sounding unnervingly thin, almost fragile, in the oppressive, unnatural stillness. Report status of the ship's choir servitors and lumen systems. Is this anomaly localized to the Chapel of St. Celestine, or is it more widespread? Give me a full diagnostic. The reply from Evangeline, my most trusted second-in-command, a warrior whose faith was as unyielding and formidable as her artificer-crafted power armor, was immediate, her professionalism a small anchor in this sea of unease. But her tone, usually so resonant with conviction, was laced with a rare, carefully controlled note of deep concern. Canoness, the silence is pervasive. All liturgical broadcasts, all devotional hymns have ceased ship-wide from the Grand Cathedral to the lowliest crew mess. Engineering reports anomalous, cascading power drains across multiple decks, primarily affecting non-essential systems such as internal lumens and localized atmospheric regulators. But the Gellerfield, praise be to the Omnissiah's chosen, is holding steady, its song strong and true. The machine spirits of the lesser systems, however, are quiescent. Unnaturally so. Chief Engineer Marius describes it as if they are listening, holding their breath, as it were. Listening. The word hung in the dead air of the chapel, heavy with unspoken, unimaginable dread. Listening for what? Or to what? The silence itself seemed to offer no answers, only a deepening sense of foreboding. I left the chapel, the great adamantium doors hissing shut behind me with a sound that was startlingly loud in the newfound quiet. My bolter Faith's Fury, a masterwork weapon gifted to me upon my elevation to Canoness, was held at the ready, its familiar, reassuring weight a small comfort in my gauntleted hand. The corridors of the Blade of Vigilance, usually echoing with the rhythmic tramp of armored boots, the resonant chanting of processional litanies, and the constant, purposeful whirring and clicking of servitors going about their endless duties, were now eerily, unnervingly quiet. Sisters I passed, their faces grim and pale behind their visors, offered silent, crisp salutes, their expressions a mixture of disciplined confusion and steely, ingrained resolve. The silence was a test, a trial sent by the Emperor to temper our faith, to strengthen our wills, and we, his chosen daughters, warriors of the Ebon Chalice, would not be found wanting. Or so I told myself, the words a familiar, comforting mantra against the encroaching, insidious unease that gnawed at the edges of my certainty. The command deck, the armored, shielded nerve center of the battle-barge, was a cavernous, multi-tiered chamber filled with ranks of tiered consoles and flickering, ghostly hololithic displays. Here, the silence was even more pronounced, more absolute, broken only by the hushed, anxious whispers of the bridge crew, their voices unnaturally subdued, and the soft, rhythmic click-hiss of my own armored boots on the polished plasteel deck. Captain Helena Rostova, a veteran voidfarer whose family had served the Imperium's fleets with distinction for countless generations, stood before the main astrogation chart, her strong, weathered face a mask of grim, focused concentration. The chart, usually a vibrant, complex tapestry of established warp routes, known system markers, and friendly astropathic beacons, was now disturbingly, ominously blank in the entire region designated as the Orpheus Reach, as if a giant unseen hand had wiped it clean of all Imperial presence. "Report, Captain," I commanded, my voice echoing unnaturally in the vast silent chamber, each syllable seeming to hang in the air before being swallowed by the oppressive quiet. Rostova turned, her eyes, the color of a stormy, turbulent Terran sea, deeply troubled, reflecting the flickering, uncertain light of the dying displays. Canoness Valerius, we have reached the designated coordinates for the primary world of this forsaken system, Orpheus Prime. Long-range augurs are inconclusive, to say the least. There is a persistent low-level and highly unusual energy field blanketing the entire system, interfering with our scans, scrambling our sensors. It's not a recognized stellar phenomenon, not a nebula or radiation belt, nor does it match any known Xenos technology signatures in our most comprehensive archives. It's almost organic in its subtle, rhythmic fluctuations, yet utterly, chillingly devoid of any life signs we can detect with our current compromised instrumentation. Orpheus Prime itself? I pressed, stepping closer to the main view screen, a knot of cold dread tightening in my stomach. Any visual contact? Any Vox transmissions, however faint or corrupted? Visual contact established, Canoness. Rostova gestured to the main view screen, which shimmered into hesitant life, displaying a mottled, sickly gray-green orb hanging silently in the star-dusted void. But it is changed. Horribly changed. The last pic captures we have from the Administratum archives, dated 3 standard months ago, show a thriving if somewhat primitive and underdeveloped Imperial colony. Sprawling, interconnected habdomes, extensive opencast mining operations scarring the surface, even a small functional orbital station, the Orpheus beacon. Now, the image sharpened, magnified by the ship's powerful optical arrays. Orpheus Prime was still there, a recognizable sphere, but it was muted, deadened. The vibrant colors of its continents, once greens and browns and blues, were dulled, leached of all vitality, as if a layer of fine, gray, ubiquitous dust had settled over everything, a shroud woven from despair and forgotten dreams. There were no city lights twinkling on its night side, no orbital structures glinting in the harsh starlight, no signs of technological civilization, no plumes of industrial smoke, no flicker of atmospheric craft. It looked like a world that had simply given up. Lain down and died, gone to sleep, an eternal, dreamless sleep. And Vox channels? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the cold knot in my stomach now a block of ice. Silent, Canoness, Rostova confirmed, her voice flat, devoid of all emotion, the voice of a captain delivering a death sentence. All frequencies. Imperial, Xenos, even open, unregulated broadcast channels. We have been hailing them for the past 12 standard hours on a continuous multi-spectrum loop, with every code, every prayer of greeting, every threat of Imperial retribution known to us. There has been no response, only this crushing absolute silence. The strange, metallic tang I had noticed in the chapel was stronger here on the command deck, more pervasive, mixed with the faint, unsettling scent of ozone, as if a great, unseen, silent electrical storm were brewing just beyond our senses, just outside the ship's hull. The very air on the command deck felt heavy, charged with a palpable, prickling static that made the fine hairs on the back of my neck, the few that remained beneath my coif, stand on end. The machine spirits of the bridge consoles seemed to hum with a suppressed fear. "Prepare a Thunderhawk gunship," I ordered, my decision made with the swift, cold certainty that had carried me through countless desperate battles. There were answers to be found on that silent world, and I would have them, or die in the attempt. I will lead a reconnaissance mission to the surface. Sister Superior Evangeline, you will accompany me with a full squad of our best Celestians, hand-picked for their faith and firepower. Captain Rostova, maintain high alert. Keep the Blade of Vigilance at a safe, defensible orbital distance, but be ready to provide immediate, overwhelming fire support if necessary. And may the Emperor himself guide our steps, for I fear we tread now in a place where his light shines but dimly. The descent to Orpheus Prime was unnervingly, preternaturally quiet. The Thunderhawk, Celestine's ire, a venerable, heavily armed gunship that had served our order for centuries, usually a roaring, vibrating beast of barely contained, righteous fury, seemed to cut through the strange, pervasive energy field that enveloped the planet with a muted, almost apologetic whine, its powerful engines subdued, its machine spirit seemingly cowed, almost fearful. Below us, the landscape unfolded in a panorama of utter, soul-crushing desolation. What had once been sprawling, interconnected hab complexes, teeming with Imperial citizens, were now little more than crumbling, skeletal ruins, half buried in a thick layer of fine gray, ash-like dust. The vast open-cast mines, which had once supplied vital ores to the Imperium's war machine, were silent, their colossal, rust-streaked excavation machinery still and lifeless, already succumbing to the slow, inexorable grip of rust and decay. There were no bodies, no signs of battle, no wreckage of vehicles or defensive emplacements. It was as if the entire population, millions of souls, had simply vanished, walked away into the dust, or been taken silently and completely. We landed on a relatively stable, cracked ferrocrete platform that had once been the main landing pad for the planetary capital, Orpheus City. The city itself, sprawling before us, was a ghost town, its plasteel and rockcrete structures eerily, unnaturally intact but utterly, chillingly devoid of life. Doors of hab units hung open, swaying gently in a non-existent breeze, revealing empty, silent interiors. Ground cars and transport vehicles sat abandoned in the wide, dust-choked streets, their engines cold, their interiors undisturbed, some with their doors still ajar, as if their occupants had stepped out for a moment and never returned. The only sound in this dead metropolis was the sharp, rhythmic crunch of our armored boots on the dust-covered ferrocrete and the low, anxious hum of our power armor systems, their internal cogitators working overtime to analyze the hostile alien environment. The silence here was different from the silence on the ship. It was not just an absence of sound, it was an active, predatory listening silence. I felt unseen, analytical eyes upon us, a cold, dispassionate, alien scrutiny that raised the hackles on my soul and sent a shiver of primal fear down my spine. The air was thin, cold, and carried that same pervasive, metallic, ozonic tang, now mixed with a faint, sweetish, cloying, almost nauseating odor, like overripe, rotting fruit on the verge of liquefying decay, or perhaps the scent of a mind giving way to madness. "Perimeter secured, Canoness," Sister Evangeline reported, her Inferno pistol, Purifier's Kiss, held at the ready, its pilot light a tiny, defiant spark of orange in the gray gloom. Our squad of 10 Celestians, elite warriors of our order, their faith an almost tangible shield, their bolters sweeping the silent, empty buildings with practiced vigilance, had formed a defensive cordon around the Thunderhawk's lowered ramp. No life signs detected, no hostiles in the immediate vicinity. This place is a tomb, Canoness, a planetary mausoleum. "A tomb implies the dead, Sister," I replied, my gaze sweeping the desolate, silent cityscape, my heart heavy with a sense of profound loss and encroaching dread. "I see no dead here, only absence, a void where life once thrived." We advanced into the dead city, moving with the cautious, practiced discipline of seasoned warriors, our senses straining for any sign of threat, any clue to the fate of Orpheus Prime's vanished populace. Each silent building, each empty, dust-filled street, amplified the growing, suffocating sense of unease. It was the sheer, unnatural stillness of it all that was most disturbing. There were no signs of panic, no hastily abandoned barricades, no evidence of a desperate last stand. It was as if the inhabitants had simply laid down their tools, closed their doors, said their final, unheard prayers, and ceased to exist. The very dust seemed to whisper of their silent, inexplicable departure. In the central plaza, a vast, wind-swept expanse of cracked ferrocrete before the crumbling, imposing facade of what had once been the Planetary Administratum building, its aquila defaced and broken, we found the first, chilling clue, a statue, or rather a grotesque effigy. It was not of the god emperor, nor of any imperial saint or celebrated hero. It was a crude, abstract, and deeply disturbing sculpture, fashioned with a perverse artistry from rusted, twisted metal, broken, scavenged machinery, and what looked disturbingly, sickeningly like human bone, fused and welded into an impossible, nightmarish form. It depicted a tall, gaunt, unnaturally elongated, multi-limbed figure, its skeletal head thrown back in a silent, eternal scream, or perhaps a silent, soul-devouring song. Its pitted, corroded surface was covered in strange, spidery, non-Euclidean glyphs that seemed to writhe and shift if you looked at them for too long, inducing a faint, lingering nausea and a sense of profound, world-tilting disorientation. Around its base, arranged in a neat, almost ritualistic, concentric circle, were hundreds, perhaps thousands, of personal data slates, vox recorders, pick tablets, and other mundane trinkets of imperial life, the kind every citizen carried. They were all utterly blank, wiped clean of all data, all memories, all personality, as if their owners had willingly, joyfully, offered up their memories, their identities, their very souls to this silent, grotesque, bone and rust idol. Tech heresy of the foulest kind, Evangeline breathed, her voice tight with righteous disgust, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her power maul. Or some form of obscene Xenos idolatry. We should purge this abomination with holy fire, Canoness. Leave not a trace of its blasphemy. Not yet, sister, I cautioned, my own hand resting on the familiar, reassuring pommel of my power sword, Wrath of the Just. Its dormant energy field seemed to thrum faintly in response to the statue's unseen emanations. There is a pattern here, a horrifying, ritualistic element. We need to understand the nature of this insidious threat before we can effectively and permanently combat it. To strike blindly is to invite disaster. As I spoke those words, a faint, almost inaudible hum began to emanate from the strange, disturbing statue. It was a low, subharmonic frequency, felt more in the bones and the fillings of teeth than heard with the ears, and it resonated with the strange, pervasive energy field that blanketed the planet, amplifying it, focusing it. The metallic tang in the air intensified, becoming almost overpowering, and the sweetish, cloying odor grew stronger, now accompanied by a faint, almost imperceptible rhythmic clicking sound, like tiny, unseen, chitinous mandibles or the dry rattle of ancient bones. One of the Celestians, Sister Helena, a young, devout, but relatively inexperienced warrior on her first off-world mission beyond the training cloisters of Ophelia VII, suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her helmet, her knuckles white. "Canoness, I hear something. A voice. No, voices. Whispering. Inside my mind. Soothing, yet cold." Her eyes, visible through the clear plasteel of her visor, were wide with a mixture of dawning fear and profound, disorienting confusion. "What are they saying, sister?" I asked, my voice sharp, authoritative, trying to cut through her distress. "Focus. Report." They speak of silence, Canoness," Helena stammered, her bolter wavering in her grasp, its weight suddenly too much for her. "Of a great welcoming peace. Of release from the burden of the self, from pain, from doubt. They say the Emperor is a lie, a false promise of light, that true salvation, true transcendence lies in the great quiet, in the endless, starless void." Her voice was becoming flat, devoid of its usual youthful fervor. "Heresy, blasphemy of the highest order," Evangeline snarled, leveling her inferno pistol directly at the pulsating, humming statue. "Resist it, Sister Helena. Cling to your faith. Recite the litany of abhorrence. Let the Emperor's truth be your shield." But it was too late. The insidious whispers had found fertile ground in the young sister's mind, a mind perhaps not yet fully tempered by the harsh realities of the galaxy. Helena's eyes glazed over, the fear and confusion replaced by a look of serene, empty, almost ecstatic bliss. Her bolter clattered unheeded to the ferrocrete. She took a slow, deliberate step towards the grotesque statue, her arms outstretched, as if to embrace a long-lost lover. "The silence, it is so beautiful," she whispered, her voice a dreamy, distant monotone, a horrifying parody of a prayer. "So perfect, so complete." Before any of us could react, before a warning cry could leave my lips, a thin, almost invisible, shimmering filament, like a strand of spun moonlight, or a tendril of solidified shadow, snaked out with impossible speed from the heart of the statue and touched Helena's forehead, right where the symbol of the Aquila was embossed on her helmet. She shuddered once, a single, convulsive tremor, a beatific, almost orgasmic smile spreading across her lips. And then, she simply dissolved. Her power armor, her weapons, her very flesh and bone, her years of training, her hopes, her dreams, her faith, all of it crumbled into a pile of fine, gray, anonymous dust, identical to the dust that covered this dead, silent world. The only thing that remained of Sister Helena was her personal data slate, which clattered with a small, pathetic sound onto the growing pile of dust, its screen now as blank and utterly empty as all the others that lay at the idol's feet. The silence that followed this horrifying instantaneous erasure was broken only by the horrified, choked gasps of the remaining Celestians and my own ragged, disbelieving breath. The statue pulsed with a faint, triumphant internal light, and the rhythmic, chitinous, clicking sound grew louder, closer, more insistent, as if a hidden audience were applauding this obscene transfiguration. "By the Golden Throne," I whispered, a cold, visceral dread, unlike anything I had ever known, gripping my heart, squeezing the air from my lungs. This was no ordinary Xenos threat. No simple heretical uprising born of desperation or delusion. This was something else. Something ancient, insidious, and utterly terrifyingly alien. Something that consumed not just lives but souls, memories, identities, leaving behind only silence, dust, and the blank slates of forgotten existences. The Emperor's blade, my faith, my purpose, the very core of my being as a canoness of the Adeptus Sororitas, felt suddenly terrifyingly fragile, almost brittle, in the face of this all-consuming, all-silent, soul-devouring void. The whispers had begun in my own mind now, soft, insidious, seductive, promising an end to struggle, an end to pain, an end to the endless, thankless, bloody crusade that was life in the 41st millennium. Promising. Silence. A silence that felt like a cool hand on a fevered brow. The clicking was all around us now, a dry, rustling, skittering sound, and from the empty, shadowed doorways of the surrounding buildings, from the dark, silent alleyways, new figures began to emerge, materializing from the gloom like nightmares given form. They were tall, gaunt, unnaturally elongated, their forms a horrifying, grotesque fusion of rusted, scavenged metal, broken, repurposed technology, and pale, desiccated, leathery flesh, their limbs clicking with every spidery, jerky, yet eerily graceful movement. Their heads, too small for their bodies, were thrown back at an unnatural angle, as if perpetually gazing at some unseen, terrible star, their faces featureless save for a single, large, unblinking, luminous green lens where eyes should have been, a lens that seemed to drink in the light and reflect only cold, analytical indifference. They carried no visible weapons, yet their very presence radiated an aura of profound, chilling, psychic menace, a palpable wave of despair and futility. They were the silent ones, the harvesters of identity, the priests of the void, and they had come for us. Their silence was their weapon, their presence their sermon. The battle for Orpheus Prime, for our souls, for the very concept of individual existence, had begun not with a roar of defiance, but with a seductive, insidious whisper. And the silence, I feared with a certainty that chilled me to the marrow, was winning. Our bolters roared, a sudden, defiant cacophony in the dead plaza, spitting explosive, sanctified death into the advancing silent tide of grotesque figures. Each bolt round, a miniature missile of faith and fury, found its mark, tearing through their grotesque composite forms, sending fragments of rusted metal, splintered bone, and desiccated papery flesh flying in all directions. But they did not bleed. They did not scream. They did not falter. They simply absorbed the impacts, their forms sometimes momentarily distorting, only to reform, their advance as relentless and inexorable as the slow decay of a dying star. For every one that fell, its green lens dimming, two more seemed to take its place, emerging from the shadows, from the very dust of the ground, with that same relentless, silent, unnerving, clicking gait. Their single green lenses fixed upon us with an unnerving, dispassionate, analytical focus, as if we were not warriors of the God Emperor, not threats to be neutralized, but merely specimens to be collected, data points to be assimilated into their silent, terrible calculus. The whispers in my mind grew stronger, more insistent, a siren song of oblivion, a chorus of voices, male and female, young and old, all speaking with the same calm, reasonable, seductive tone. Lay down your blade, Canoness Isolde Valerius. Your struggle is meaningless, a futile spasm against the inevitable. Your faith is a phantom, a comforting lie you tell yourself in the face of the great, empty truth. There's only the silence, the beautiful, perfect, all-consuming silence. Embrace it, become one with the void, find peace, find release. Faith is my shield, the Emperor is my strength. I roared, the words a desperate prayer, a defiant cry against the encroaching, insidious mental darkness that sought to unravel my very being. I activated the crackling energy field of Wrath of the Just, its sacred, ancient adamantium blade, humming with righteous, incandescent power, casting a halo of golden, defiant light in the oppressive, encroaching gloom. Sisters, stand with me. For the Emperor and for Terra, we will not yield to this emptiness. We will show these abominations the fury of his chosen. The Celestians, their initial shock and horror giving way to the ingrained, ferocious battle fury of their order, responded with a ragged but defiant chorus of, "The Emperor protects." Their bolters spat fury, their chainswords howled like banshees, their flamers spewed torrents of sanctified, cleansing promethium, turning the nearest silent figures into brief, incandescent, silently burning pyres. But still they came, their numbers seemingly endless, their advance unwavering, their silence more terrifying, more demoralizing than any Xenos war cry or demonic roar. It was a silence that mocked our fury, that absorbed our faith, that promised only the ultimate, cold negation. Sister Evangeline fought beside me like a lioness of the faith, her inferno pistol spitting gouts of superheated armor-melting melta energy, her power maul, Redeemer's might, crushing a silent one's torso with a sickening, wet crunch of metal, bone, and dried, leathery flesh. "They are an abomination, Canoness," she yelled over the din of our desperate battle, her voice tight with righteous, holy hatred. "A perversion of flesh and machine, a mockery of the sacred human form. They must be purged, every last one." Her faith was a burning, unquenchable fire, a stark contrast to the cold dread that was attempting to seep into my own heart. But even as we fought, even as we cut down rank after rank of these silent horrors, I could feel the insidious tendrils of the silence coiling around my mind, seeking purchase, whispering doubts, exploiting every flicker of fear, every moment of weariness. The metallic tang in the air was overwhelming now, acrid and sharp, and the sweetish, cloying odor of decay was mixed with the coppery scent of our own spilled blood, our own sweat, the smell of our desperate, failing mortality. The relentless, rhythmic clicking of the silent ones was a counterpoint to the roar of our weapons, a patient, inexorable rhythm that promised an inevitable, silent end. It was the sound of a clock ticking down to zero. One by one, my brave, faithful sisters began to fall. Not to grievous, honorable wounds inflicted by a worthy foe, not to overwhelming physical force, but to the insidious, soul-stealing silence. Sister Thalia, her bolter suddenly, inexplicably silent, her eyes glazing over with that same serene, empty, horrifying bliss that had claimed young Helena, simply stopped fighting mid-volley. She lowered her weapon, a faint, almost peaceful smile on her lips, and allowed the silent ones to envelop her, their clicking limbs moving with a strange, almost gentle solicitude, a brief shimmering distortion in the air around her, and then only dust, a blank data slate, and the faint, lingering scent of ozone remained. Sister Ishana, a veteran of the Gilus heresy, a warrior whose faith had been forged in the fires of unimaginable conflict, screaming a final, defiant prayer to the martyred lady, was touched by one of the almost invisible, shimmering filaments that snaked out from the advancing figures. Her powerful, ceramite-clad, heavily augmented form dissolved into a pile of fine gray ash before our horrified, disbelieving eyes, her prayer cut off mid-syllable. The whispers were a torrent now, a deafening, overwhelming cacophony of seductive promises and chilling, undeniable truths. "Your emperor is silent, Canoness. He does not answer your prayers. He has abandoned you to the void, to the inevitable entropy. But the silence is always here, always patient, always waiting, always welcoming. It is the true mother, the true father, the ultimate destination of all things." My faith, the bedrock of my existence, the Emperor's blade I had wielded with such certainty for so long, felt like it was cracking, splintering, disintegrating under the relentless, insidious assault. The golden light of my power sword seemed to dim, its confident hum faltering, becoming a weak, uncertain thrum. Doubt, a cold, venomous black serpent, began to uncoil in the deepest, most sacred recesses of my soul, its fangs dripping with the poison of despair. Was this all there was? Was our endless crusade, our sacrifice, our devotion, all for nothing? Just a brief, noisy, meaningless struggle against an inevitable, silent end? "No," I screamed, the word a raw, ragged, desperate sound, torn from the depths of my fracturing will. I will not yield. I am a daughter of the Emperor. I am his wrath." I lunged forward, wrath of the just, scything through the nearest silent one, its composite, unholy form exploding in a shower of gray dust and faint, green sparks. But another took its place instantly, and another, their single, luminous green lenses fixed on me with an expression that was not hatred, not anger, but pity. A cold, analytical, almost compassionate pity. As if I were a frightened, confused child stubbornly refusing a bitter but ultimately necessary medicine. A medicine that would cure me of the sickness of individuality, of the pain of existence. It was Evangeline, my steadfast, indomitable sister superior, who saved me from succumbing entirely to the encroaching despair. Seeing my momentary hesitation, the flicker of doubt and weariness in my eyes, the slight wavering of my blade, she roared, her voice a clarion call of pure, unadulterated faith that cut through the whispers like a blessed sword. Canoness, remember your vows. Remember the sacrifices of the martyred lady. We are his fury. We are his light. We do not break. We do not yield. Fight, Canoness, for his sake, fight. She grabbed my arm, her gauntleted grip like iron, pulling me back from the brink of the abyss, her own faith a burning, unshakable beacon in the encroaching, soul-consuming darkness. Her words, her touch, the sheer unyielding force of her conviction, broke the spell. The whispers receded, though they did not vanish entirely, now sounding more like the petulant whining of a thwarted child. The fire of righteous anger, of holy purpose, of stubborn, defiant pride, flared anew in my soul, burning away the tendrils of doubt. "To the Thunderhawk," I yelled, my voice regaining some of its former strength, its commanding resonance. "We cannot win here. Not like this. We must warn the Imperium. We must find a way to fight this silence. We must carry word of this new damnation." Our retreat was a desperate, chaotic, fighting withdrawal. Only 4 of us remained. Myself, Evangeline, and 2 veteran Celestians. Sister Maria, her face a grim mask of determination, her heavy flamer spitting gouts of liquid fire, and Sister Anya, her bolter barking defiance with every shot, her movements economical and deadly. We laid down a curtain of disciplined bolter fire and sanctified promethium, carving a bloody, burning path through the relentless, silent tide of clicking, composite figures, back towards the distant, hoped-for sanctuary of the landing platform. The city of Orpheus Prime, once a beacon of imperial hope in this benighted reach, was now a sprawling, silent tomb, a monument to an insidious, soul-devouring horror, its very dust saturated with despair. We reached the Thunderhawk, its ramp already lowering, its engines whining with a desperate, almost panicked urgency. As we scrambled aboard, dragging our wounded and our dead in spirit, if not yet in body, I looked back one last time. The silent ones had stopped at the edge of the landing platform, their single green lenses fixed on us, their gaunt, skeletal forms unmoving, a silent, patient, watching army. They did not pursue. They did not need to. They had planted their seeds of silence in our minds, in our souls. They knew, with a chilling, absolute certainty, that the silence, given time, would eventually claim us all. Their victory was not a matter of if, but when. The journey back to the Blade of Vigilance was made in a grim, heavy, suffocating silence of our own. The whispers still echoed in the dark corners of my mind, a constant, insidious, seductive temptation. I looked at Evangeline, at Maria, at Anya. Their faces were pale, streaked with grime and the ash of their fallen comrades, their eyes haunted, reflecting horrors no training could prepare them for. But their faith, though battered, bruised, and deeply shaken, still held, for now. We were alive, but a part of us, a vital, irreplaceable part, had been left behind in the dust of Orpheus Prime. Aboard the battle-barge, the situation had deteriorated catastrophically. The silence was more profound, more absolute, the power fluctuations more severe, more widespread. Crew members, from the highest-ranking naval officers to the lowliest deck-scrubbing ratings, were reporting vivid, terrifying nightmares, auditory hallucinations of clicking and whispers, a growing, crushing sense of despair and utter futility. Several, unable to bear the psychic pressure, had taken their own lives, leaving behind only blank data slates and a faint, lingering, sweetish scent of ozone and decay. The machine spirits of the ship, from the mighty plasma drives to the humble cogitators of the Medicae Bay, were almost entirely dormant, unresponsive to the most desperate pleas, the most sacred rituals of the increasingly frantic tech priests. The Blade of Vigilance, once a proud, indomitable warship of the Imperium, a symbol of his unyielding might, felt like a dying behemoth beast, its great iron heart slowly, inexorably failing, its soul ebbing away into the encroaching void. "Canoness," Captain Rostova reported, her voice a strained hoarse whisper, her usually immaculate uniform disheveled and stained, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow from lack of sleep and overwhelming, unrelenting stress. She looked like a woman who had stared into the abyss for too long, and seen the abyss stare back. The energy field blanketing the system, it is contracting, slowly but measurably, inexorably, and it seems to be drawing us in, towards Orpheus Prime, towards that idol. The navigators are incapacitated, lost to us. They scream of a great, silent, hungry mouth in the warp, a void that hungers for their souls, for their third eyes. We cannot translate, we cannot escape. We are trapped, Canoness. Utterly trapped. Trapped. The word echoed the insidious whispers in my mind, a death knell for hope. Trapped in a dying ship, in a dying system, with a silent, soul-devouring, cosmic horror closing in, its tendrils already wrapped around our vessel, around our minds. I convened an emergency council of war in the Strategium, the grand, vaulted chamber usually reserved for planning glorious crusades and righteous purges against the enemies of man. Now it felt like a funeral parlor, cold and dim, the air thick with despair. Myself, Sister Superior Evangeline, her face set in lines of grim, unyielding defiance. Captain Rostova, her composure frayed but her professionalism intact. And the few remaining senior officers who had not yet succumbed to the silence or to madness. Chief Engineer Marius, his myriad augmetics twitching erratically, his synthesized voice a despairing static-laced rasp. Astropath Primus Lyra, her sightless, milky eyes weeping tears of dark, viscous blood, her frail mind a shattered mirror reflecting only silence, terror, and dread. "We cannot stay here," I stated, my voice flat, devoid of its usual fire, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "The ship is dying. The crew is succumbing to the whispers, to the despair. We must find a way to break free of this system, to warn the Imperium of this new, terrible threat, even if it costs us everything." "But how, Canoness?" Engineer Marius croaked, his mechadendrites trembling so violently they threatened to detach from his chassis. "The engines are failing, their machine spirits silent and unresponsive. The navigators are lost to us, their minds consumed by the void. The very stars around us are wrong, alien, hostile. We are adrift in a sea of absolute crushing silence with no map, no compass, no hope." "There must be a source," Evangeline insisted, her voice a defiant spark of faith in the overwhelming gloom, her fist clenching around the hilt of her power maul. "A nexus for this psychic plague, this spiritual contagion. If we can find it, if we can destroy it, perhaps we can break its hold, silence its whispers." "The statue in the plaza," I mused. The image of that grotesque bone and rust idol burned vividly into my memory, a symbol of this system's damnation. It seemed to be a focal point for the energy, for the whispers, and those whispers, they spoke of a great quiet, a void, a release. Astropath Primus Lyra, who had been slumped in her ornate cushioned chair, her frail body racked with violent, uncontrollable tremors, suddenly straightened, her head snapping up, her voice a dry, rasping, chilling whisper, yet carrying an unnatural, terrifying resonance that filled the Strategium. "The silence, it is not empty, Canoness, it is full, pregnant, full of an ancient, patient, listening, hungry intelligence. It calls itself the Undersong, the true voice of the void, the harmony of ultimate entropy. It promises an end to the cacophony of existence, a return to the perfect, primordial, silent null from which all things came and to which all things must inevitably return." Her head lolled back, her jaw slack, and a thin trickle of black, oily, iridescent fluid, like the ooze from the corrupted cogitators on Ironvale in another unrelated, yet chillingly similar tale of technological woe and spiritual corruption, seeped from the corner of her mouth, from her empty eye sockets. Her mind, once a sacred beacon for interstellar communication, a conduit for the Emperor's will, had become a mouthpiece for the enemy, a vessel for the Undersong. "The Undersong," I repeated, the word tasting like cold ash and ultimate despair on my tongue. "This is no mere Xenos entity, no simple demonic incursion. This is something older, something fundamental, a force of cosmic entropy, a sentient void, given malevolent will and an insatiable hunger for souls, for existence itself. Then we must fight it with all the strength of our faith, with every ounce of our being," Evangeline declared, her voice ringing with a conviction that momentarily pushed back the oppressive gloom. She slammed her power maul onto the Strategium table, the impact echoing like a thunderclap. "If it has a voice, however silent, it can be silenced by the Emperor's truth. If it has a heart, however dark and ancient, it can be pierced by his righteous fury." Her words, though brave, though filled with the unshakable faith of a true sister of battle, felt hollow, almost futile, against the crushing, tangible weight of the silence that now filled the Strategium, that filled the dying ship, that filled the entire cursed system. The whispers in my mind intensified, no longer seductive but commanding, imperious. "It is inevitable, Isolde Valerius. Your struggles only prolong the discord, the unnecessary pain. surrender. Find peace in the perfect null. Become nothing, become everything, become silent. My power sword, Wrath of the Just, lay on the table before me, its once gleaming adamantium blade now dull, its golden light seeming to have faded almost entirely, its once vibrant, confident hum now a barely perceptible mournful thrum. The Emperor's blade, was it too being claimed by the silence? Was my own faith, my own will, so weak that even this holy relic was failing me? A new sound, or rather a new, profound absence of sound, made itself known with chilling finality. The faint, rhythmic, reassuring throb of the Blade of Vigilance's mighty plasma drives, the last vestige of the ship's fading life, the very heartbeat of our vessel, sputtered, coughed, and then died. The emergency lumens, already dim and flickering, gave one last pathetic gasp and then went out, plunging the strategium and the entire vast battle-barge into absolute, impenetrable, suffocating darkness. The silence was now complete, perfect, all-consuming, eternal. And in that perfect, terrifying Stygian darkness, a single, luminous, malevolent green lens ignited directly before me, where Astropath Primus Lyra had been sitting, its cold light reflecting in my wide, horrified eyes. Then another, and another, and another. The clicking began, soft at first, tentative, then growing louder, more confident, a chorus of unseen, innumerable, metallic limbs moving in the sudden, absolute blackness, a sound that promised dissection, assimilation, and ultimate erasure. The Undersong had come aboard the Blade of Vigilance. It had found its new choir, and we were to be its first, unwilling members. The battle that followed was not a battle in any conventional sense of the word. It was a desperate, blind, stumbling struggle in the suffocating, disorienting darkness, against an enemy that was both chillingly physical and insidiously ethereal. An enemy that sought not just to kill our bodies, but to erase our souls, to consume our identities, to add our silenced voices to its terrible, empty chorus. Our bolters, mighty weapons of the Imperium, were useless against foes we could not see, their thunderous roars swallowed instantly by the oppressive, sound-dampening silence, their muzzle flashes providing only fleeting, confusing glimpses of skittering, multi-limbed horrors. Our power weapons, their sacred energy fields sputtering and failing in the face of this anti-life energy, cast only fleeting, disorienting, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. We fought by faith alone, by the ingrained, instinctive muscle memory of countless drills and life-or-death battles, by the desperate, defiant prayers that caught like ash in our throats. I felt Evangeline beside me, a comforting, solid presence in the chaos, her power maul whistling through the darkness with deadly force, connecting with something that crunched and shattered with a sound like breaking pottery, only to be replaced instantly by more clicking, slithering, unseen sounds. I heard Sister Maria scream, a choked, gurgling, abruptly terminated sound, then a soft final sigh, then silence. Sister Anya, always defiant, let out a final, glorious war cry, followed by the unmistakable, whooshing sound of her heavy flamer igniting, a brief, glorious, defiant gout of orange, sanctified light that illuminated, for a horrifying instant, a scene of utter, unimaginable horror. The strategium swarming with the tall, gaunt, clicking figures, their single green lenses burning with cold, analytical, hungry light, their spidery limbs reaching, before it too was extinguished with a sickening, wet hiss, and Anya's brave voice was silenced forever. I was alone. Alone in the suffocating darkness, alone in the soul-crushing silence, with the whispers now a deafening, irresistible chorus in my mind, promising oblivion, promising peace, promising an end to the pain, the fear, the struggle. My power sword, Wrath of the Just, felt impossibly heavy in my trembling hand, its light completely, finally extinguished, its once proud hum silenced. The Emperor's blade had failed. My faith had failed. I had failed. "It is done, Isolde Valerius," the Undersong whispered, its voice now coming from all around me, from within me, a cold, triumphant, sibilant caress. "Your Imperium is a fleeting, insignificant dream in the vastness of eternity. Your Emperor is a fading, powerless echo, a dead god on a golden throne of lies. There is only the silence. And soon, very soon, you too will be part of its perfect, eternal, beautiful harmony." I fell to my knees, my strength gone, my will shattered, my faith a hollow, aching ruin in my breast. The clicking figures closed in, their cold, metallic limbs brushing against my armor with a dry, rustling sound, their touch sending shivers of icy despair through me. I could feel the almost invisible, ethereal filaments reaching for my mind, for my soul, eager to erase the last stubborn vestiges of Isolde Valerius, Canoness of the Adepta Sororitas, unworthy servant of a silent emperor. This was it. The end. Not in a blaze of glorious, defiant battle, not in a martyr's noble sacrifice upon the altar of faith, but in a cold, silent, ignominious, anonymous dissolution. The silence had claimed me. My blade was broken, my light was extinguished. But as the first cold, questing filament touched my forehead, as the blissful, welcoming numbness began to creep into my consciousness, promising an end to all suffering, a single, defiant, unexpected spark ignited in the desolate ruins of my soul. A memory. A verse from the Catechism of the Warrior, a passage I had recited 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, in training, in prayer, in battle, a passage that had always seemed more poetic than practical, a comforting fiction for frightened novices. Though my blade may break, and my body fail, and the darkness claim my sight, yet shall the Emperor's light reside within my heart, a fire that cannot be extinguished, a truth that cannot be silenced. The Emperor's light, within my heart, not in my sword, which now lay useless beside me, not in my armor, which was no defense against this foe, not even in my faith, which had proven so fragile, so vulnerable to the whispers of the void, but within me. The spark of humanity, the indomitable, often irrational will to exist, to resist, to be, that the Emperor himself, in his infinite sacrifice, had embodied and bequeathed to his scattered, struggling children. With a final, desperate, almost convulsive surge of will, a will that was entirely my own, forged in the crucible of 73 years of thankless service and unending war, I focused on that tiny, flickering spark. I fanned it with the last embers of my defiance, nurtured it with the memory of my fallen sisters, poured into it all that remained of my stubborn anger, my fierce love for the flawed, corrupt, yet irreplaceable Imperium, for the very concept of light in a universe drowning in an ocean of eternal darkness. The whispers in my mind faltered, their seductive cadence broken by a note of surprise. The encroaching blissful numbness receded, like a tide withdrawing from the shore. The luminous green lenses of the silent ones, for the first time, showed a flicker of something other than cold, analytical indifference. Was it confusion? Or perhaps a dawning, alien form of fear? The spark within me grew, from a flicker to a flame, from a flame to a raging, incandescent inferno. It was not the golden light of my power sword, nor the holy fire of a living saint. It was something simpler, something more fundamental, something more human. It was the raw, untamed, defiant light of a single mortal human soul, refusing to be extinguished, refusing to be silenced, refusing to surrender its identity to the all-consuming null. I did not have a weapon that could harm these creatures. I did not have my sisters to stand beside me. I did not even have my faith, not in the way I had understood it before, not as an external shield but as an internal fire. But I had myself, my will, my name, Isolde Valerius. And for this one final, desperate moment, that was enough. That had to be enough. The inferno within me erupted outwards, not as a physical blast of heat or energy, not as a psychic shockwave that could shatter minds, but as a wave of pure, unadulterated, defiant being. A scream of existence in the face of the all-consuming silent null, a declaration, I am. The effect on the silent ones, on the pervasive, insidious Undersong, was unexpected and profound. They recoiled as if struck by an invisible hammer, their clicking, composite forms spasming violently, their luminous green lenses flickering erratically, some even shattering with tiny, implosive pops. The whispers in my mind shattered into a million discordant, screeching fragments, like a broken record. The oppressive, suffocating silence was, for a fleeting, glorious moment, broken by a sound like 1,000 crystal glasses, a million delicate chimes, shattering simultaneously, a symphony of sudden, violent liberation. I felt a tearing sensation, as if my very soul were being ripped apart, stretched beyond its limits, but also a strange, exhilarating, almost painful sense of release, of lightness. The absolute darkness in the strategium seemed to lessen, to recede, replaced by a faint, pearlescent, almost opalescent glow that emanated impossibly from me, from the very core of my being. Then nothing. Oblivion claimed me, but it was an oblivion of exhaustion, not erasure. I awoke to pain, a dull, throbbing, all-encompassing ache that permeated every fiber of my being, both organic and augmented. I was lying on the cold, hard plasteel deck of the Strategium. The emergency lumens were flickering weakly, erratically, casting a pale, sickly, uncertain light. The silence was still there, but it was different, thinner, less oppressive, less sentient. The clicking figures, the silent ones, were gone, vanished as if they had never been. The cloying Swedish rotten odor had faded, leaving only the familiar, almost comforting metallic tang of a void ship's recycled air and the faint, lingering scent of burnt promethium. Sister Superior Evangeline, her armor dented and scarred, her face smudged with soot but her eyes blazing with a fierce protective light, was kneeling beside me, her hand on my shoulder, shaking me gently. "Canoness, by the Emperor's grace, you live. You live." Her voice was hoarse, filled with a raw, incredulous relief. "Evangeline," I whispered, my throat raw, my voice barely audible. What happened? The Undersong? The Silent Ones?" I do not know, Canoness," she said, her voice trembling slightly, her usual iron composure shaken. "One moment we were overwhelmed, lost in the darkness, about to be consumed. The next there was a light, a blinding, pure, almost unbearable light that seemed to come from you. It pushed them back, it shattered the silence, and then they were gone. The silence, it lessened. The ship's systems, some of them are responding again. The plasma drives. Chief Engineer Marius reports they are attempting to reignite. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. My power sword, Wrath of the Just, lay beside me, its adamantium blade dull and lifeless, its energy field completely depleted. The Emperor's blade, had it truly failed? Or had it merely been a conduit, a focus for something else? Something unexpected, something within me. The Blade of Vigilance shuddered, a familiar, welcome groan of protesting, tortured metal. The main view screen flickered to hesitant life, showing the mottled, sickly gray-green orb of Orpheus Prime, still hanging silently in the void. But the oppressive, cloying energy field that had blanketed the system, that had been drawing us in, was weaker. Fading. Dissipating like mist in the morning sun, revealing the cold, indifferent stars beyond. The navigators, Canoness. Captain Rostova's voice, weak but tinged with a dawning, unbelievable hope, crackled over the ship-wide vox. They are stirring. They are regaining consciousness. They speak of the great silence receding, of the oppressive weight lifting from their minds. They believe they can find a way out of this cursed system. They are plotting a course. We had survived. Orpheus Reach, though scarred, its populace silenced and erased, was no longer entirely lost to this particular horror. The Undersong, though perhaps not destroyed, not permanently, had been repulsed, driven back into whatever dark, silent corner of the void it had spawned from, its song momentarily broken. But at what cost? My sisters, so many lost, their memories, their very existence, turned to dust. My faith, shaken to its very foundations, the comfortable certainties I had clung to for so long, now revealed as fragile things in the face of true cosmic horror. And the silence? I could still feel its echoes in the deepest, most hidden recesses of my mind. A cold, empty, hollow space where the insidious whispers had been. A space that would perhaps never truly be filled again. A scar upon my soul. The Emperor's blade. It was not just the sword I carried, nor the holy order I served. It was, I now understood with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating, the indomitable, often irrational, will of humanity itself. The refusal to surrender to the darkness, the stubborn courage to find light even in the deepest, most profound silence. That blade, though battered and chipped, though its physical manifestation might fail, had not, in its truest sense, broken. As the Blade of Vigilance, scarred, limping, and bearing the ghosts of its lost crew, finally broke free from the cursed Orpheus Reach and translated, with a jarring, violent lurch, back into the turbulent, but blessedly familiar chaotic currents of the warp, I stood once more in the chapel of St. Celestine. The servitor choir was still silent, their delicate mechanisms too damaged, perhaps beyond repair by even the most skilled of engineers. The lumen globes still cast only a pale, uncertain, flickering light. The silence here was now just an absence of sound, no longer a malevolent presence. But the great icon of the Emperor, his golden, impassive visage, no longer seemed distant or indifferent. In the dim, uncertain light, I thought I saw a flicker of something in his ancient, all-seeing eyes. Approval? Understanding? Or perhaps it was merely a reflection of the faint, new, and entirely unexpected light that now seemed to emanate not from my tarnished power sword, but from within my own weary, scarred, but stubbornly unyielding human heart. The silence had claimed much. It had taken my sisters, it had shaken my faith, it had left an indelible mark upon my soul, but it had not claimed everything. The Emperor's blade in its truest, most fundamental form, the spirit of humanity, endured. And the war against the darkness, the war against the silence, the endless, thankless, glorious crusade would continue. For that, I knew with a certainty that transcended dogma, that transcended even faith, was the eternal, unyielding, often discordant, but ultimately defiant song of humanity, and it was a song that would never, ever truly be silenced. The Orpheus Reach would need to be purged, its worlds reconsecrated with fire and blood, a grim warning placed upon its borders for all eternity. The memory of the Undersong, of the Silent Ones, would serve as a chilling testament to the myriad, unimaginable horrors that lurked beyond the fragile veil of the Emperor's light. My report to the Holy Ordos, to the Synod Ministra, would be a grim one, a tale of loss and terror. But it would also carry a sliver of an impossible, unexpected victory, a testament to the fact that even when all seems lost, when faith falters and blades break, the simple, stubborn will to fight, the very essence of what it means to be human and to serve a cause greater than oneself, can sometimes, just sometimes, be enough to turn back the deepest, most profound night. The silence was a wound upon the galaxy, a scar upon my soul, but even wounds could heal, and in those scars there was a story of survival. A lesson learned in the crucible of despair. That, I decided, as the Blade of Vigilance limped towards the distant, flickering light of an Imperial Navy outpost, was a truth worth fighting for, a truth worth carrying back into the light, a truth to be etched into the annals of the Adeptus Sororitas, a new verse in our unending song of defiance. The Emperor's blade was not merely an instrument of war, it was the unquenchable spirit of those who wielded it in his name, even in the face of oblivion. And that spirit, I now knew, could indeed be a fire that cannot be extinguished.